when you watch someone with a high degree of skill doing that, it's very magical and quite arty the way it's done. It's quite incredible. But then I think, that's where the creative process kicks in, because once you've deboned all of that and you've got all your different cuts, what the hell am I going to do with this thing?
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. What does it mean to be the very best? Many in the hospitality sector strive to be the best in their field, to be recognised by their peers, by their critics, and by their guests. But for Justin North, aiming for the pinnacle and the vision of the best changes as quickly as the culinary landscape. Justin, how are you?
Very good, mate. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
It's good to catch up with you. You've been involved in so many restaurants that sort of hit right at the pinnacle, and also, delivering incredible value as well and offering. How has your sort of perception of sort of being the best and, in the industry changed over the years as you got older?
I don't know. I think for me, I was just really fortunate at quite a young age to be exposed to some really, really good chefs and work with some very sort of quite kind and nurturing chefs, like pretty full on and disciplined. But I think when you're exposed to that at quite a young age, you get a real, I think, love and passion for food and a real desire to sort of want to create and teach and just sort of honour the time that they've given you, and then, use that as your craft and use that as your sort of inspiration and motivation.
If you think of yourself as, in that sort of the boiling pot and the pressures you had when you were sort of, Becasse was kind of, one of the best restaurants, and you're helping other restaurants now sort of reach their pinnacle. Does it feel different sort of looking from the outside in and helping them compared to what you felt in that intensity?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I think it's really nice. I think when you're in business for such a long time and running your own business, it's so intense and so full on, and you create a lot of great stuff and you make a lot of mistakes. And I think to be in a position now after doing this for, goodness, I would say, 25, nearly 30 years, you learn so much. And I think to be able to help others and mentor other chefs and give guidance and, I guess guide people away from the same mistakes you've done, you just get to learn, advise them on great things that do work and being careful of stuff that doesn't work, if you know what I mean. And it's very rewarding. I think when you start a project and it becomes, the seed is a concept, and to see that sort of develop with architects, designers and builders on paper, and then gradually see that come to life over a period of time, it's such a rewarding process, and building a team and a really great culture and just the detail involved in working with, I just get so inspired working with really great, interesting people with good ideas. And I think, when you're sitting around a table and there's designers and builders and owners and chefs and PR and branding and marketing, it's just such a beautiful collaboration, and it's not necessarily about getting across your point of view so much. It's more about, listening and learning. And, I think when everyone's on the same page, you just get to be able to create something really, really special.
Well, I want to explore that in greater detail and particularly delve into sort of your mentors, given that your role now is almost as a mentor for different businesses and people. But take us back to New Zealand. You grew up over there. What was it like growing up as a kid in New Zealand, and what sort of role did food play?
Yeah, it was a very simple life, we would just sort of very quite humble and didn't have much money, and but it was just sort of quite traditional in the sense that we would grow our own vegetables, and not because it was a trendy thing to do, but it was just the way of life. It was quite old school in the sense that Dad would have a beautiful garden and grow carrots and potatoes and all sorts of different stuff, and would have chickens, and just the process, I guess, of in the afternoon he'd go and dig up the vegetables, bring them inside, give them a wash, and Mum would cook dinner. So it was just real sort of paddock to plate type thing, but just just through necessity rather than it being a particular trend or getting back to nature or anything like that. So I guess I was sort of exposed to fresh, reasonably good quality food at quite a young age. But I think back then, but this is more thinking back, it wasn't something that I really thought about much then because it was just what life was. Life was very simple, like back in, I was born in 75, so I mean, in that first decade is obviously, you know, you're just hanging out, playing with your mates, and you're outside all day and you're playing rugby and doing all that sort of stuff. Like it's just simple and fun. So there wasn't real much exposure to good food then, other than, mum being a great cook and that sort of thing. So I think my passion for food didn't really develop until I sort of started working in the kitchen, and I was just really fortunate, as I said earlier, to be surrounded by amazing chefs, and it was very addictive. It just grew and grew my passion.
And take us back to that moment. What were your sort of first steps and the real major inspirations as you sort of got started?
Well, I think when I left school, I just did like a hospitality course at the local Polytech TAFE. It's like a 3-month course or 6 months, I think, but it was more in hospitality hotel management, and I did a month in the kitchen at that time, and I just really loved it. I did a lot of art at school, so the correspondence between the connection, I guess, between my love for art at school and the creative stuff in the kitchen, I was just like, wow, this is, I could actually have a career doing this. This is pretty, and I had no idea what to do next. So then I went to Wellington and did an apprenticeship in a hotel. And it was then I was surrounded by some fabulous chefs, who really encouraged me to enter, those sort of old school competitions, where you're like glazing stuff and aspic and all that. So I was doing all that. But it was interesting because it was sort of, you're on a stage, but it was like you were on your own. So you really had to think and prepare and get everything absolutely right. And it just made you sort of think independently, opposed to being in a big brigade where you're quite young apprentice, you're sort of just a shit kicker in a corner. Whereas this sort of really helped me step up a lot. And I went on to win like Apprentice of the Year and all those sort of things, Commie Chef of New Zealand and that sort of stuff at quite a young age. So I think when you get exposed to that, it's the adrenaline rush is quite sort of addictive. And then I started reading Marco P. White's first book when that came out and really wanted to go to Europe. And I just didn't understand then what, the heights of gastronomy was. So my goal was to go and work for some of the best chefs in the world just to see what this was all about and see how far you could take it. But I got some good advice then, and I knew that if I was to go straight in, as a 19-year-old kid, to go straight into a Michelin star restaurant in France or England or somewhere like that, you'd be exposed to a lot, but the advice was you probably wouldn't learn too much. You'd just be in the corner picking herbs and you wouldn't really be of value. So the advice was to go to Australia first. I spent a year or so in Sydney, and that's when I met Liam and Matt Kemp and at Brasserie Cassis. And Liam was an incredible influence on my life, and like that kitchen was just intense. But he knew I was there for 1 year, and he knew I wanted to go to Europe, so he put so much pressure on me to kick my ass every day to put me into a really good training and frame of mind to be able to go into Europe, into these really intense kitchens and survive and learn and actually be of value rather than just, go there and sit in the corner sort of thing. So
We've had a few chefs on the show that have been influenced by Liam and worked with him. What is it that you take? And I know you experienced a lot of time at Bank as well. What was it that he gave you to sort of to move forward in regards to your career?
I think he had this real beautiful balance between being the whip on one hand and really pushing you to sort of encourage you to achieve as much as you could and not compromise. He would not compromise on anything. So it was all about, this is the way, this is what we do, and we won't settle for second best, and it was very, very intense and very, very difficult and quite aggressive. But on the other hand, I think particularly, at that stage, it was a very male-dominated industry too back then. And, we were all young boys, away from home and without our parents and all that sort of stuff. And he was a wonderful father figure for us as well. So you sort of had the kick up the arse on one side, but a very nurturing sort of thing on the other side. And I think that helped us grow, I think, into good men and become fairly good fathers ourselves and, try and be quite nurturing later on in our life towards other young chefs. I think when you can see the value that gives, it's really, and the awareness of that is quite important.
You went to Sydney to sort of almost prepare yourself for Europe. How different was it when you got there, and where did you work?
Well, so what I actually did, so I looked at basically the five. I decided I wanted to go to England, so I looked at the five sort of greatest chefs at the time in England. So there's Per Kaufman, Raymond Blanc, Roux Brothers, I think Anton Mossyman, Marco, and I'd handwritten five letters to them, and with CVs, and then I can't remember what happened, but I didn't end up posting them. I think in my mind I thought, well, I'd hand deliver it when I'm there. And then I thought, well, I'll just go to all of these places, and surely out of those five, I'll get into one of them. I didn't really care which one because they're all of equal status, you know. I just wanted, and they're all the best, you know, at that time. So the first one that I actually rang was Raymond Blanc, and I sort of got through to the head chef at the time, which was Jonathan Wright, and I was living in London with Matt Kemp at that time. We'd actually gone over for Sean Connolly's wedding. And yeah, so we always used to hang out, and that was in 1996, I think it was. So I got invited to go to Le Manoir and have a stage or a trial, I should say, for I think it was about 2 or 3 days. So they put me up in a B&B. I think I spent my last few pound on a black cab from London out to Oxford, or Great Milton. And then I did 3 days there, cooked for Raymond, ended up getting a job. I think I went back to Matt's, grabbed my suitcase and everything, and just went and got some share accommodation in Wheatley, which is a little village close by in Oxfordshire, and spent probably three of the greatest years of my life with Raymond Blanc, and that was sort of between um, 96, and I think I came back around end of 99, 2000. And again, like Liam, Raymond was a completely different type of chef, but still just very, very nurturing, and the time he would give you and the information and everything was just phenomenal, you know. And even how long's that, 25, 27 years later, he's still in contact. Like, he'll still message me and see how you're doing and what's happening. And there was a time when I was sick, quite ill with COVID, and I ended up getting pneumonia, and I was in hospital for bloody a period of time. But he would message me every single day to make sure I was okay. You know? Yeah. But that's sort of the type of person he is. So I think you learn a lot of life skills as well as cooking skills. And that's the balance I think those two men have, those qualities.
Pork underpins a lot of French and European cooking in many different ways. Do you remember how that sort of weaved through the menu in your time over there with Romain Blanc?
Oh yeah, like I think. Well, I think it was actually the first time I was exposed to whole beast butchery would have been at Le Manoir. So I'm pretty sure it was every Wednesday we would get a whole carcass of pigs come in. I think it was probably between 10 and 15 whole pigs. And when I was on the saucier, we'd have to break them down for the whole week. So we'd just do, yeah, we'd have sort of competitions to see who could bone them out the fastest, you know, and we'd split them into the racks and the bellies, and we'd do beautiful tête cochons and ballantines from the heads and pig's tails, and bone out like the trotters. We used to, like the old Per Kaufman one, we used to do caramelized sweetbreads, truffle, caramelized onions, and morels bound with a beautiful chicken mousse. Like, you'd bone out the trotters and braise them first, and then stuff them with a mousse, roll them, steam them, serve it with a beautiful Madeira jus. It was absolutely incredible. But the technical skill involved, you know, when you're selling 25 of them a day, you're busy, you know. But I think to be exposed to that, but also using it, like, there wasn't a skerrick wasted. And I think that's what first sort of led me to my passion for that nose to tail type thing. You know, like even bits of trim would be used to make a beautiful pâté de campagne that minced, and all the bones would make a beautiful, you know, brown pork stock. And yeah, it was phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. And when I remember when I was sort of back at Picasso, I'd use that as inspiration for a lot of dishes, like doing assiette of pig's head and all that sort of stuff. And even being influenced by some chefs from an earlier era, like Fernand Point from Pyramid, and, you know, and I think that was in the 30s or 60s or something. He used to actually do a famous dish with calves' ears. But when I was at Picasso, we couldn't get calves' ears, but we used to do it with pig's ears. So would actually get the pig's ears and braise them for a few hours. So they'd go really soft and gelatinous, and all the cartilage would sort of break down and be soft and gooey, and like the mouthfeel was just amazing. But then, similar to the trotters, would do like a mousse, and it'd be sweetbreads and foie gras and truffle, and stuff it inside the ear and roll it into a cone shape. And would actually get a needle and string and tie it together. So you'd actually thread the needle through it, and you'd end up with this beautiful cone, and then you'd roll it in crumb, basically pane it, flour, egg, breadcrumb. And then once it's set, you'd pull out the string and then deep fry it. So you'd get this beautiful golden crispy shell. You'd break through that into this lovely gelatinous pig's ear, and then inside you get all the mousse and the sweetbread and the foie gras and all that. It's absolutely sensational.
The labour required for a dish like that sounds incredible. What's the depth of the labour involved? And do you think that sort of art and craft is lost a little bit, in the modern market?
Definitely. Like you have to think, like when we first started Bacchus, we were sort of doing 16, 18-hour days pretty much every day, and I guess now we're sort of, and rightly so, on a 38-hour to 45-hour working week. So you're limited to what you can do in that time. So a lot of those dishes, like even doing the Ballantine, the pig's head would take 3 or 4 days. Like we used to bone out the pig's head, braise it, but we used to do like pickle the pig's tongue, stick that in the middle, and then pickle the meat off the skull. So you'd pick out all the meat around the eye socket and and the snout and all that, and the cheekbones and everything. And it would all those different bits of meat would have different colouring. So you'd stuff that in the back in the pig's head when it was completely boned out, all the pickled tongue, and then once you braised it and set it and sliced it, you'd get this amazing mosaic of all the different sort of coloured parts of the pig's head. Yeah.
You mentioned you learnt to sort of work your way through a whole pig and butcher it over in the UK. Take us through that process. Is there any sort of tips or tricks to really getting that right to make sure you're using absolutely everything?
Yeah, well, the things that I learned, one was just obviously having a really sharp boning knife. And I think when you're learning, it's quite difficult to know where to go. So we were taught that we didn't really need to use a cleaver. So if you'd use a really sharp boning knife, and you basically just follow, because if in essence what you're doing is you're basically removing the meat from the bone. So if you're just following, you sort of feel through, keeping your knife as close to the bone as possible and just feeling through, over a period of time, you just build up this real sort of intuition of where it's going and feeling where the sockets are and just slicing straight through it. And when you watch someone with a high degree of skill doing that, it's very magical and quite arty the way it's done. It's quite incredible. But then I think, that's where the creative process kicks in, because once you've deboned all of that and you've got all your different cuts, what the hell am I going to do with this thing? And the amount, we just talked a little bit about ears and tails and stuff, and, just the head alone, from making tête de cochon, doing ballantines, even the old English bath chaps where you're sort of boning the head out and tying it in almost this big conical shape, and I used to braise it in, I used to do like a brown pork stock, but you'd sort of say, for 2 litres of brown pork stock, you'd add in 2 litres of duck fat, and it would separate. So you'd have like the base would be the brown pork stock, and then the duck fat would sort of float on the top, and then the bath chap or whatever you're doing, the ballantine, a pig's head, would sort of float and bob between the two. And if you're rolling it into ballantine, you'd sort of stab it with a skewer quite a few times so all the juices would sink into it. But it would get this incredible flavour of a braise, but then it would get the wonderful texture and mouthfeel of a confit with a duck fat. So you'd sort of get the best of both worlds. So it's absolutely phenomenal. So, it's like unlimited things that you can do with the pork. But even the more, I guess, primal cuts like the rack. I remember when we did the first Bacchus cookbook, I did a chapter on Bangalore sweet pork. So at the time, I think the pioneer of pork in this country was, what's his name, Joe Byrne. And he worked with an agricultural scientist, which was Jim Berting, and they basically spent decades trying to breed the fat back into pork, because there's this campaign, I guess it was maybe around the 80s or 90s or whatever, where farmers were paid a higher price to breed the fat out of pork. So what we ended up on the supermarket shelves was a very dry, tough, no flavour, cardboard product. And then pork sales started to fall because there's a campaign against having fat. So what Joe and Jim did with Bangalore sweet pork is they breeded unsaturated fat back into the rare breeds of pigs. So you ended up with this incredible, beautiful layering and intramuscular marbling of fatty, beautiful pork, but healthy pork. So, yeah, I mean, spending time with their passion, but it was things like, say, with a rack, for example, like to get a beautiful crackling, I'd always score the skin first, rub salt into it. I'd try and leave it in the fridge overnight if I could, but uncovered. So the salt sort of draws the moisture out. But then, say if you were to wrap it in cling film, then the cling film sort of attracts the moisture and it stays on. So leaving it uncovered keeps it nice and dry. And then when you caramelize that skin side down in a pan first before you roast it, and when you've got those rare breeds of pork, it's this incredible, beautiful, crunchy crackling. And then you go into the nice depth of fat. But the fat it's not like that slimy, white, unhealthy fat. It's creamy, delicious, like it's got this incredible mouthfeel. But what would happen, because of that intense layer of fat under the skin, would protect the meat. So even though the meat had a lovely intramuscular marbling for it, it wouldn't dry out when you were roasting it because it had that layer of fat that would sort of render into the meat and keep it just moist and juicy and how pork should be. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's incredible.
When you came back to the Southern Hemisphere and you were part of that team at Bank, the four horsemen of the food apocalypse, Fasnage and Matt Kemp and Warren Turnbull, you guys all sort of came out of that school. Take us into that kitchen. Did it feel like a British kitchen, or was it a bit different to that?
No, it was very much so. Like a lot of young guys, young cooks, young girls who would train in Europe and came back to Sydney or came back to Australia wanted to find a kitchen where they could really utilise their skills. So it was a combination of the people that were there, but I think more so Liam attracted, because you want to be challenged as a chef and you want to be pushed and you want to achieve the best. And, for that, those type of personalities that really wanted to achieve something special would be attracted to that kitchen. So, you'd have a kitchen full of quite highly skilled, very, very focused, very, very good quality chefs all working together, with Liam as the ringmaster or whatever there, bringing everyone together and making sure we executed everything to a very, very high degree. And, essentially you're a craftsman. And as a craftsman, you want to keep perfecting your skill and keep refining what you do. So you want to work with people like Liam and Matt Kemp and Wazza and Fass and everyone else that came out of that kitchen. But with that intensity, you would also need the release. So we had an amazing bond, everyone who worked in that kitchen, and, we would work incredibly hard and we would play equally as hard. So, we created an amazing bond, and, just this weekend we all caught up for Boz's Bucks, and, we've been mates since, probably over 25 years. And yeah, and it's a very special bond.
Given that our bank, had that kind of English or European feel in the kitchen, but it was in Sydney and with that sort of clientele, was there any sort of pork dishes at that time that sort of spoke of that mix of, the Australian and sort of European dynamic?
Yeah, I think, well, there's quite a few. Like there's one in particular, I think, which I always love, and it's quite a classic, but it's, the confit pork belly. Like, to me, it's hard to beat that. Like, it's probably sounds a bit boring these days, but, to take like a whole slab of pork belly and completely submerge it in duck fat and, to slow cook that for 3 or 4 hours till it's so soft and tender, take that out and then, press it overnight and then cut it into little squares or rectangles or whatever and caramelize that skin side down. It's just absolutely phenomenal, and you have that with caramelized scallops or something, and you can't beat it. It's just absolutely sensational. It's the best. We used to do other little things as well, like we'd get little baby suckling pigs in and do little acid of pig on a plate with the tiny little trotters boned out and just play around with some really quite incredible stuff there.
Tell us about the period of time when it was time to open your own restaurant and what that was like for you.
Yeah, it was. I guess I was. I think I was 25 at the time, and at that time I'd been cooking for 10 years, and I think as a young man, then you sort of. I just got to the point where I'd worked for some incredible chefs, and I was sort of getting frustrated. Like I just want to go and do my own thing. Like I think when you are patient and stay with a couple of good chefs, you learn their philosophy and because it's not a case of going to work for loads of different chefs and stealing their recipes. When you work with them for a long time, you actually learn about what makes them tick. And then I think when you sort of blend their philosophy with your own philosophy, you sort of develop your own style, and you just get to a point where you don't want to work for anyone anymore. You want to sort of really express. Like I love the arts and love creating, and you know, I just wanted to go and be free and do my thing. And so I just opened up Becca's, and I borrowed money, and I think it was probably about $80,000 then, back in when was it, 2001, I think. But I had no idea what I was doing. Like I'd never ever ran a business. I'd never gone to any sort of business school or anything. It was just purely about being in the kitchen and trying to create beautiful food and building, a great culture and doing something amazing that, was just from the heart and passion and everything. It was scary, but it was really rewarding. But it was incredibly hard.
It's interesting to hear that how art was very important to you at a young age, and I know it's weaved threads through your personal life. But as a diner in your restaurants, what ended up on the plate was incredibly artistic of its time. Did you find that pressure to sort of combine those worlds, with that presentation on the plate?
Yeah, like I don't I mean, pressure, yes. Like the whole environment was pressure. Like it was pressure from 7 a.m. in the morning going to the markets, was pressure trying to get the right product for the right price and being inspired by what you saw there. It was pressure through the prep, like we were only open for dinner, but would get back from the markets and would spend all day trying to prep, and you just never felt like you were going to get there. And the clock used to just go so fast. 1 minute will be 8 in the morning, next minute it's midday and it's 3 o'clock, and then service is looming, and you're just like, fuck, we're not going to get there, and you're just under so much pressure. And then you finally just get ready as the first guests are coming through the door, and you're exhausted and you haven't even done service yet. So, and then you get to sort of 10:30 and you're cleaning down and you're starting to look at the ordering and what's on the menu the next day, and then by midnight you're sitting down looking at the food cost and doing all that sort of stuff, and then you've got to get back up. So I mean, the whole day was intense pressure. But back to your question in terms of the pressure around combining the craft with the creativity and what's on the plate, I don't know. I think it's just the process of, first and foremost, you want the guests to feel special and you want them to feel good about yourselves, and you want them, when a plate of food goes down in front of them, like it's for smell, it's eating with your eyes, it's before you even take that spoon. Like the first thing, you want them to go, wow. And that comes through the presentation, and whether it's quite detailed and quite fancy and quite involved, or whether it's just something that's very, very simple but looking clean, and the plate being perfectly polished, and choosing the right plate for the right dish and having the right colours so everything just pops. Like I love using colour through purees and jus and sauces and vegetable garnishes and all that, just to really make things pop on a plate, make it look absolutely delicious. And it goes back to utilising that whole beast of the pig. You want to, that whole process, you just want it to be good. Like I would feel you would fail if you went through that whole process of breaking down a pig, doing all these amazing things with it, and then you put it on the plate and it looks like slop. You'd just fall at the last hurdle. So I think every single stage is just as important as the other.
One of the things that really stands out in my mind, having enjoyed your food quite a few times, is the different elements of a a pig or a rabbit or a different protein on the plate. Like there'd be multiple different sort of parts of the animal celebrated in different ways. Tell us a little bit about that and the approach that you had with many of your dishes.
Well, I think it's a lot of different things. There's a nose to tail approach, so you don't want any waste. That's the first thing, and then it's sort of how do you showcase that beast to its best ability? And I think one of the dishes I loved the most was a pig's head. So showcasing that with a beautiful little, we used to do a caramelized ballantine of pig's head, a little slice of pan-fried tongue. There's a little bit of, fatty, juicy braised cheek, and then a bit of crispy pig's tail on there, or pig's ear. And I just think it's beautiful to eat a lovely piece of pork belly or a roast piece of, rack or loin. But I think it's so much more interesting when you've got these, 3 or 4 different cuts from the one beast, all cooked very differently. And, the texture and the flavour and the mouthfeel and all that of every single one of those things, I think you're just really showcasing that beast to its best ability. And, that's one part of it. And then the other part, as a chef and a craftsman, you love boning out pig's tails and braising ears and pig's heads and cheeks and, cleaning the racks and all that sort of stuff. Like it's part of your skill. It's part of what you do. So, you don't just want to grab a fillet and chuck it in the pan and roast it, rest it, slice it. Like there's not much to that, I think you want to test yourself, but you also want to showcase the product as well. And I think the best way you can do that is by doing those little elements on the plate.
These days, you're helping other people sort of get their businesses either up and running or back on track with Concept Hospitality. What's been the best project you've been part of?
Oh, it's hard to have it's like having a favourite child, I think, but they're also different, like I'll work with amazing hotels. I love the new sort of mid-scale luxury hotels that are coming into Sydney and working on those food and beverage projects. I mean, what Mitchell's done at, say, Ace, I think is fantastic. There's 25 Hours, which is coming to Sydney soon. There's some really, really cool projects out there, and to work on those sort of things is brilliant. And then even back to up in Noosa with JD's Chicken, that's a chicken shop up there, and it's completely different, but it's great. We've got a little wine bar called Apero up there as well, and it's like a little tiny hidden 20-seat, very European style wine bar. Sophia's just opened in Surrey Hills, which is like a southern Mediterranean casual grill, which is fabulous. Really excited. We've just started building the Hurricanes group are launching a new project, which is phenomenal. We're working with Rachel Acchetti, the designer, Stephanie Early as well from House of Ely. She's also involved, and a really, really great bunch of creative people on this project. So I'm really excited about that. That's hopefully sort of opening late June, early July down in Cronulla. So that's a real passion project at the moment. Also, the relaunch last year of Mount Pleasant Wines was really exciting. They're all different. I don't know if there's favourites in there. They're just, and I think as a creative, like I just get so inspired by working with really, really good creative people. You just get such a buzz from it, when everyone comes together and shares ideas and, and ultimately it's that deep fascination in what makes businesses work.
You've been to the pinnacle and continue to evolve and grow in the sector. What sort of advice do you have for young professionals looking to really make a great career in hospitality?
I think it's one of those careers where you can't be sort of half in. Like I think you've just really got to give your best and really be quite open to learning and being creative and going out and eating and seeing what other people are doing and just being inspired and using that to inspire you and just, like I honestly believe we're here for a short period of time and you get one opportunity And I just would encourage everyone to give their best and be all in on what they're doing, and not be arrogant, but be open to learning more and working with good people and being a good person and just giving everything that you choose to do.
Well, Justin, you continue to be an inspiration to the culinary landscape in Australia, and it's an absolute honour to have you on the Crackling today to hear what you're up to. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Will do. Thank you for having me on, mate. I appreciate it.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.